Hello and welcome to how to write an essay on Article 5. First of all, 8 marks for the AO1. This is the factual content. So watch my previous video on the key elements of Article 5 and then I would structure it. So I do all the AO1 first. It's much easier. You can learn this off by heart and then you regurgitate it. You put it down in the exam and that gives you 8 out of 8 for AO1, which is excellent. Then you can move on and just think, right, I've only got 12 marks to get. That's not many. That's 4 or 5 well-developed evaluation points. Some may be more developed than others, and that is fine. Okay, so these are in no particular order. First of all, I would say something about control orders and TPIMs. Remember, TPIM stands for Terrorism Prevention and Investigation Measures. Now, control orders were the old name for this. These are given to suspected terrorists, and you can detain people and control them if you believe that they might be part of some kind of terrorist activity. Now, they are quite, controversial, I guess, because they fall outside of the criminal justice system. So that means they're not properly regulated. Quite possibly they breach Article 5 and could be unlawful, because if you detain somebody on suspected terrorist offences, it's like, well, what evidence do you need? I mean, they're rarely used, but they still exist. So that is problematic. Now, one of the other points, which actually I would say with all the articles, with anything on human rights, there are some generic points that you can mention in any essay, which is brilliant, whether it's Article 8, whether it's Article 5, whether it's about the Human Rights Act. First of all, we know that Article 15 allows derogation in an emergency. So that means in an emergency, that Article 5 does not have to be followed. Same with all the other articles. I would then question, well, hang on a minute, what is an emergency? Is this power going to be abused? When will an individual be protected? The government are the ones who are deciding what an emergency is. So, that could be open to corruption. So they're basically saying we do not have to follow these rights set out in law if it's in an emergency. Also remember that Parliament only has to follow the decision of the European Court of Human Rights in as far as it is possible to do so. So again, that is another vague term. When are they going to do that? What if they don't do it? Because remember, when you take a case to court, it does not change the decision in your case. You're doing it for future people. So yes, it's good. You can get compensation. However, we can't go back in time. We can't say, oh, you were detained unlawfully, let's undetain you. It's like, that's not a thing. Okay, so I would mention kettling because this is when the police contain people in a certain area. Now, again, the law, is it concise enough? Well, kettling can only be used by the police as a last resort. It must be proportionate. You should not be kept for longer than necessary. So in the case of Austin, people were delayed or detained for over 7 hours, and that was not a breach, but 7 hours seems quite excessive. So are kettling orders, are they, is there the potential for abuse by the police? Now, in defence of the police do have to detain people. When you are arrested on suspicion of a crime, remember they can hold you for 96 hours. And that is really important because they need to be able to investigate whether the person has committed the crime or not. Now, if they detain you and do not give you your rights, then you can, I guess, sue the police. You can bring a challenge against the police. The problem we have with things such as stop and search is Metropolitan Police Force in London were found to be institutionally racist and professionally incompetent. So you are more likely to be detained and stopped and searched if you are black. This statistic changes a lot, but roughly 8 times. So that is a concern. Are the police detaining the right people? Looking at some of the elements of Article 5, well, you can be detained if you are of unsound mind. I would say this is good because it protects the public against a dangerous person, potentially dangerous person, Also, it protects the individual who has or who is of unsound mind, because they may hurt themselves. So they do need protecting from themselves, and we need protecting from them. Now, I would say this is quite well controlled, because detention has to be reviewed regularly. I would argue, what is regularly, and unwell people have human rights. Absolutely morally right that they are protected and that they have the same human rights. You cannot reduce somebody's human rights because they're mentally unwell or they have a disability. A patient is protected because medical experts need to agree on whether they should be detained. But I would just kind of be aware that in this day and age with staff shortages, how often is detention reviewed? Now, a defendant has the right to be tried within a reasonable time. So when we detain people in custody awaiting the trial, they should only be remanded for 182 days. However, this is frequently extended by judges, which means somebody's liberty, they are being deprived of their liberty. Now, they may well have committed the crime. However, what if they haven't? What if they are truly innocent and they are found not guilty by a jury? Well, then we have locked them up. This 182-day limit for people on remand is frequently extended by judges. We have had so many cuts to the legal system that we now have about 60,000 trials awaiting, these people are waiting their time in court. The other thing I would say is, well, there's a nice little quote that justice delayed is justice denied. So that's quite a nice little one to get in there. A suspect is protected because any detention must follow a prescribed procedure. It must be lawful. So you can only be detained by people who have the authority to do that. Great, that is good, that protects you. There are various cases you could talk about. Cheshire West sets a nice little quote from Lady Hale about whether you are being deprived of your liberty. Well, are you under continuous supervision and free to leave? And the issue with Cheshire West, I'm not quite sure it was a breach personally, because he was ingesting the contents of his incontinence pad, and why was that a deprivation of liberty? I mean, they put him in a bodysuit so he couldn't do this, but I just kind of think, what was their other option? I mean, they tried to stop him doing this. He wasn't mentally well enough to accept this. So people in care, there's a very fine line with the rights of the person in care and protection of the public and protection from themselves, as we said earlier. One of the other issues you can talk about is any challenge about the articles and your rights being breached relies upon an individual bringing a case to court. So first of all, you have to know your rights. Is everybody aware of their rights? Also, you have unelected judges who are, the process is undemocratic. We haven't voted in these judges, and they are from different countries and they are making decisions on our laws. So perhaps that's an issue. The other points that you could talk about, you could talk about indeterminate sentences and how somebody can be detained in order to protect the public if they have committed, a very serious offence. So there are lots of points that you can discuss. Is the definition of liberty clear enough? It's a question of degree and intensity. Do you think it strikes the right balance between an individual and the public? So an individual whose rights must be protected, but also the public who must be protected. You can link this into some of the points with the police, how suspected terrorists can be detained for 2 weeks. Is this fair that we make the distinction? And how we talked about being stopped and searched, but at the police station that you have various rights during your detention, like you have the right to legal advice, you have the right to a break, you have the right to a phone call. So the law, I think overall, probably, other than the delays, is probably quite fair. So have a think. If you've got any questions, any comments, just let me know.